Sometimes the smallest thing on the floor can bring down the biggest lie in the room. William Harrington stared at the piece of paper in silence. Around him, the executive boardroom remained perfectly still. No one dared speak. No one dared move. The receipt resting between his fingers looked ordinary. A hotel receipt. Slightly folded. Barely noticeable. The kind of thing most people would throw away without a second thought. But for William, it had just shattered 15 years of trust. 15 years. The room felt colder than before. Across the polished conference table sat Ethan Cole, the man William had once called a brother. The man who had helped build Harrington Capital from a struggling investment firm into a multibillion-dollar empire. Ethan's face had gone pale. For the first time in years, he had no answer. No explicación. No carefully crafted response. Just silence. And it had all started 3 nights earlier inside one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. The evening rush had arrived with its usual rhythm. Crystal glasses reflected warm light. Expensive watches flashed beneath tailored suit sleeves. Conversations about mergers, investments, and private jets floated through the air like background music. Maya Brooks moved quietly between tables carrying a tray of coffee cups. At 28 years old, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Most customers never remembered her name. Some barely looked at her face. To them, she was simply the waitress. But Maya noticed things. Small things. The details other people ignored. The nervous tap of a finger. A forced smile. A wedding ring removed before dinner. She remembered faces. Voices. Habits. It was a skill she had developed long before working at the restaurant. A skill that often told her more than people intended to reveal. That evening, she spotted William Harrington the moment he entered. Even if someone had never seen his picture in a business magazine, they would have noticed him. He carried the quiet confidence of a man used to making billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. Walking beside him was Ethan Cole. The 2 men looked relaxed, laughing as they approached their private dining room. Maya poured water, took orders, and stepped away. Nothing seemed unusual, until an hour later. As Ethan stood from the table to greet someone across the room, a small piece of paper slipped from his jacket pocket and drifted silently to the floor. Nobody noticed. Nobody except Maya Brooks. And that single moment was about to change everything. Maya bent down and picked up the receipt before anyone else could see it. She intended to place it on the edge of the table and continue working. Nothing more. Nothing less. That was what most people would have done. But as she straightened the paper between her fingers, something caught her attention. Her eyes moved across the printed lines. The name of a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan. A suite number.
Suite 2708.
1 overnight stay. 2 registered guests. Maya was not trying to read private information. In fact, she immediately looked away. But one name remained in her mind. Felt familiar.
Uncomfortably familiar.
She slipped the receipt into her apron pocket, planning to return it later. The dinner service continued. Plates arrived. Wine glasses were refilled. Laughter echoed from private rooms filled with executives discussing opportunities worth millions of dollars. Yet every time Maya passed William and Ethan's table, she found herself thinking about that name. After her shift ended near midnight, the restaurant grew quiet. Chairs were being stacked. Floors were being cleaned. Outside, the city lights reflected off rain-soaked sidewalks. Maya sat alone in the employee break room with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Finally, she unfolded the receipt again. This time she read every line carefully. Then she saw it. Her heart skipped a beat. The second guest listed on the reservation was Lauren Mitchell. Maya immediately recognized the name. Lauren was not a stranger. She had been coming to the restaurant for years. Not as a customer. As a regular companion to William Harrington. His executive assistant. The woman who seemed to know every detail of his schedule. Every meeting. Every flight. Every confidential business dinner. Maya remembered her perfectly. Professional. Organized. Always carrying a tablet. Always standing a few steps behind William during important events. The realization made her uneasy. Why would Lauren be staying overnight in a private hotel suite with Ethan Cole? Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a business emergency. Maybe the reservation system had made a mistake. Maya wanted to believe that. She truly did. But something felt wrong. The next evening, William returned to the restaurant. So did Ethan. Maya noticed them immediately. They looked exactly as they always did. Relaxed. Comfortable.
Familiar.
William laughed at one of Ethan's stories. Ethan smiled back. Years of friendship were visible in every interaction. Watching them together made Maya feel even more conflicted. She was just a waitress. They were powerful people living in a completely different world. What business did she have questioning anything about their lives? Yet throughout the evening, small details began to accumulate. Ethan checked his phone repeatedly. More than usual. Lauren arrived unexpectedly around 8 o'clock. She was not scheduled to attend the dinner. At least not according to the conversation Maya overheard. When Lauren entered the private dining room, Ethan's expression changed for a fraction of a second. A glance. A silent acknowledgement. Gone almost instantly. Most people would never have noticed. Maya did. Then, shortly before dessert was served, she saw something else. Ethan slipped a sealed envelope from his briefcase and discreetly handed it to Lauren beneath the table. No words.
No explanation.
Just a quick exchange before both returned to their conversation as if nothing had happened. Maya stood frozen beside the coffee station. Suddenly, the receipt in her apron pocket no longer felt like a coincidence. That night, Maya barely slept. Rain tapped softly against her apartment window while the city glowed beyond the glass. The receipt sat on her kitchen table beside an untouched mug of tea. She stared at it longer than she wanted to admit. Part of her wished she had never picked it up. Life was simpler when you ignored things that did not belong to you. Yet the image of Ethan passing that envelope to Lauren kept returning to her mind. Again and again. The next morning, Manhattan woke beneath gray skies. Maya arrived at the restaurant early. She told herself she would focus on work and forget everything. But by lunchtime, William Harrington's name appeared on the reservation list once again. Private meeting. For guests. Same dining room. Same table. As the afternoon passed, Maya quietly served coffee and sparkling water while executives discussed market forecasts and upcoming acquisitions. William sat at the head of the table. Confident. Focused. Calm. Every person in the room listened when he spoke. His reputation had been built on seeing opportunities before anyone else. Yet watching him now, Maya could not shake the feeling that he was missing something happening right beside him. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late, not unusual enough to attract attention. Still, Maya noticed the way Lauren glanced toward the door the moment he entered. It lasted less than a second. Then both returned to their professional masks. The meeting continued. Numbers were discussed. Contracts reviewed. Future plans outlined. Everything appeared normal. Until Maya carried a fresh pot of coffee into the room and overheard a sentence she was never meant to hear. One of the executives mentioned a competitor. A company that had somehow predicted Harrington Capital's last 3 strategic moves with astonishing accuracy. William frowned slightly. The comment clearly bothered him. It was not the first time confidential plans had somehow become public knowledge. Maya saw Ethan answer immediately, calmly, smoothly. He blamed industry rumors and market analysts. The explanation seemed reasonable. Everyone accepted it. Everyone except Maya, because for the first time a different possibility entered her mind. Maybe the hotel receipt was not about a personal relationship at all. Maybe she had been looking at the wrong story. The thought sent a chill through her. Later that evening, after most guests had left, Maya walked through the nearly empty dining room collecting glasses. Near the entrance, she spotted Lauren speaking quietly on her phone. Lauren did not notice her. Maya heard only a few words before moving away, but those words stayed with her. The documents are ready. Nothing more. Nothing dramatic. Yet something about the tone felt wrong. Too careful. Too guarded. Maya finished her shift and headed toward the employee exit. She should have gone home. She should have forgotten everything. Instead, she stopped beside the manager's office where local business newspapers were stacked on a shelf. One headline immediately caught her attention. Another major deal involving Harrington Capital had unexpectedly collapsed weeks earlier. Millions of dollars had vanished in potential revenue. Analysts called it bad luck. Competitors called it brilliant timing. Maya looked at the article. Then she looked at the folded receipt in her pocket. Suddenly the pieces began fitting together. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to form a disturbing picture. If she was right, the secret hidden behind that hotel reservation was far bigger than friendship. Bigger than loyalty. Bigger than anything she had imagined when she bent down to pick up a simple piece of paper from the floor. For 2 days, Maya carried the weight of uncertainty. She served tables, refilled coffee cups, smiled politely at customers. Yet her mind kept returning to the same question. What if she was wrong? William Harrington was one of the most powerful businessmen in New York. Ethan Cole was his closest advisor. Lauren Mitchell had worked beside him for years. People like them lived in a world far beyond hers. A waitress did not walk into the lives of billionaires and accuse trusted executives of betrayal. The thought seemed ridiculous, and yet the evidence continued to grow. On Friday evening, the restaurant hosted another private gathering for Harrington Capital. Rain streaked across the tall windows while executives discussed an upcoming acquisition rumored to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Maya moved quietly through the room carrying trays of drinks. As always, nobody paid much attention to her. That invisibility had become one of her greatest strengths. She could observe without being noticed, listen without interrupting, see what others overlooked. Halfway through the evening, William stepped away to answer a call. The moment he left the room, Ethan's behavior changed. He lowered his voice. Lauren moved closer. The conversation lasted only seconds. Then both returned to normal before William came back. It was subtle, almost impossible to detect. But Maya saw it. Later that night, another strange detail appeared. Lauren accidentally left a folder on the conference table while gathering materials after the meeting. Ethan picked it up before anyone else could. Their eyes met, not with panic, not with surprise, with understanding, the kind shared between people protecting the same secret. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She no longer believed this was about a personal relationship. This felt organized, deliberate, bigger than either of them alone. The following afternoon, William returned unexpectedly. He arrived without assistance, without security, without the usual crowd of executives surrounding him. He sat alone near the window overlooking the city. For the first time, he looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. Maya poured his coffee and noticed several business newspapers spread across the table. Headlines described failed negotiations, lost opportunities, competitors somehow staying one step ahead. William stared out the window for a long moment before quietly folding the papers. Maya hesitated. Her heart raced. This might be her only chance. Yet fear held her back. What if he thought she was seeking attention? What if he dismissed her completely? She returned to the service station and looked at the folded hotel receipt she still carried in her apron. The paper had become worn at the edges. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary thing. But sometimes truth arrived disguised as something ordinary. Across the room, William lifted his coffee cup and stared into the dark surface as if searching for answers. Maya took a slow breath. Then another. Finally, she made a decision. She would not accuse anyone. She would not tell him what to believe. She would simply place the receipt in his hands and allow the facts to speak for themselves. Because some truths are too important to ignore, no matter who discovers them. William looked up as Maya approached his table. The restaurant was nearly empty now. Only a few guests remained, speaking softly beneath the warm glow of hanging lights. For a moment, Maya almost turned back. What was she doing? She was a waitress carrying a hotel receipt. He was one of the most influential businessmen in America. Their worlds were not supposed to cross like this. Yet something told her she would regret staying silent far more than speaking up. She stopped beside the table. William offered a polite smile, the kind people give when they expect a routine question about coffee refills or dessert menus. Instead, Maya carefully placed the folded receipt beside his cup. "Sir, I think this belongs to someone from your team," she said quietly. William glanced at the paper. At first he seemed confused. Then he unfolded it. His eyes moved across the printed lines. Maya expected questions. Instead, she saw something else. Focus. Pure focus. The same expression that had likely helped him build his fortune. He studied every detail without speaking. The hotel name, the suite number, the guest information. When he reached Lauren's name, his eyebrows narrowed slightly. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Maya saw it. William looked up. "Where did you get this?" His voice remained calm. Maya explained exactly what had happened. Nothing more, nothing less. She told him Ethan had dropped it several nights earlier. She mentioned seeing Ethan and Lauren together afterward. She described the envelope exchange she had witnessed. She avoided assumptions, avoided accusations. She simply presented facts. William listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked back at the receipt. The silence stretched between them. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you for bringing this to me." That was all he said. No dramatic reaction. No immediate questions.
No visible anger.
Just gratitude. Maya left the table unsure whether she had helped at all. The next week passed quietly. William stopped visiting the restaurant. Ethan and Lauren disappeared as well. Business continued as usual. Customers came and went. Life moved forward. Yet Maya sensed something had changed. Somewhere beyond the walls of the restaurant, events were unfolding. Then, 10 days later, the financial world erupted with rumors. News outlets reported an internal investigation at Harrington Capital. Several confidential projects had been placed under review. Corporate auditors arrived at company headquarters. Market analysts began speculating. No official explanations were given, but whispers spread quickly through Manhattan's business community. Something was happening inside the empire William Harrington had spent decades building. One evening, Maya glanced at a television mounted above the restaurant bar. William appeared briefly during a business interview. He looked different, more serious, more distant. The interviewer asked about recent company developments. William offered only a short response. Sometimes the greatest risks do not come from competitors. Sometimes they come from the people you trust most. Maya felt her heart sink, because in that moment, she knew he had found something. The receipt had not ended the story. It had only opened the door. The investigation moved quietly. That was what surprised people the most. There were no public accusations, no dramatic press conferences, no headlines naming suspects. William Harrington had spent decades building his reputation, and he was not about to destroy it with reckless decisions. Instead, he did what he had always done best. He gathered facts. Inside Harrington Capital, teams of auditors reviewed years of financial records. Information technology specialists traced document access logs. Attorneys examined contracts that had once seemed routine. Day after day, the picture became clearer. And with every new discovery, the silence inside William's office grew heavier. The first breakthrough came from an internal report. Several confidential proposals had been accessed shortly before competitors announced suspiciously similar strategies. At first, analysts had dismissed it as coincidence. Now it looked very different. The timing was too precise, too consistent, too deliberate. William sat alone in his office late one evening, surrounded by folders and reports. Manhattan glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally, the city inspired him. Tonight, it felt distant, cold. Across his desk sat a photograph taken nearly 15 years earlier. A younger William standing beside Ethan Cole during the opening of their first major office. They looked proud, optimistic, unstoppable. William picked up the frame and stared at it for a long time. Trust was a strange thing. It took years to build and seconds to question. Yet he still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Some misunderstanding. Some missing piece he had not yet found. Then another report arrived. This one changed everything. The hotel meeting was not an isolated event. Investigators uncovered records showing repeated private meetings between Ethan and Lauren over a 7-year period. Not dozens. Hundreds. Different locations. Different dates. Different projects. Yet one pattern remained constant. Shortly after those meetings, confidential information somehow found its way outside the company. William read every page personally. He refused to delegate it. Each detail felt like another crack spreading through a foundation he had trusted for years. The most painful discovery was not the financial damage. Harrington Capital had survived losses before. Money could be recovered. Opportunities could be rebuilt. What hurt was realizing how close the betrayal had been. Ethan sat beside him during board meetings. Lauren managed his calendar. They attended family celebrations, shared victories, celebrated milestones. They had never been outsiders looking in. They had been part of his inner circle. Meanwhile, life at the restaurant continued as usual. Maya knew nothing about the details of the investigation. She only noticed that business channels continued discussing unusual developments at Harrington Capital. Customers speculated over dinner. Reporters debated possibilities on television screens above the bar. Yet no one knew the full story. One rainy evening, Maya finished her shift and stepped outside. The air smelled of wet pavement and city lights. As she walked toward the subway entrance, a black sedan slowly pulled to the curb nearby. The rear window lowered. Maya stopped. Behind the glass sat William Harrington. His expression was calm. But there was something different in his eyes now. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Understanding. He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "You were right to bring me that receipt." Maya felt her breath catch. William glanced toward the rain-covered streets beyond the window. Then he added quietly, "What we found was far worse than I imagined." The rain continued falling as William sat quietly inside the sedan. Streetlights reflected across the glass, turning the city into a blur of gold and silver. Maya stood beside the curb, unsure what to say. William Harrington was not a man known for showing emotion. Yet tonight, there was no trace of the confident billionaire she had watched for months. There was only a man carrying the weight of a difficult truth. 7 years, William said softly, almost to himself. For 7 years, they were feeding information to people outside the company. Maya remained silent. She knew this was not a conversation about money. It was about trust. William looked down briefly before continuing. "The financial damage was significant, but that is not what keeps me awake." His eyes lifted toward the rain-covered skyline. "It is realizing how many times I defended them, how many times I trusted them when others had doubts." For a moment, neither spoke. The city moved around them. Taxis passed. Pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas. Life continued as if nothing had changed. Yet for William, everything had changed. "You know what surprises me most?" he asked. Maya shook her head. William gave a faint smile. "The people I paid millions to protect the company never noticed. The consultants never noticed. The analysts never noticed. A waitress did." Maya looked down. "I only saw something that felt wrong." William nodded slowly. "Most people see something wrong and look away." The window rose, and the sedan disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. Maya watched until the taillights vanished. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. 3 days later, the business world received its answer. Harrington Capital announced major leadership changes. Ethan Cole was gone. Lauren Mitchell was gone. Official statements remained professional and brief. No public accusations.
No dramatic explanations.
Just facts. Investors reacted immediately. News channels analyzed every detail. Financial reporters spent hours discussing what might have happened behind closed doors. But only a handful of people knew the full story. The real climax arrived 1 week later. Inside the executive boardroom of Harrington Capital, William sat across from Ethan for the final time. Years of friendship filled the silence between them. There were no raised voices. No angry speeches. Only documents spread neatly across the conference table. Access records, financial reports, communication logs, evidence gathered piece by piece. Ethan stared at the papers. The truth sat in front of him, impossible to ignore. William waited, not because he needed answers. The investigation had already provided those. He waited because 15 years deserved at least a moment of honesty. Ethan finally looked up. His expression carried exhaustion more than defiance. The room remained silent. The city skyline stretched beyond the windows. William studied the man he had once trusted like family. Then he slowly reached into a folder and placed a familiar piece of paper onto the table. A simple hotel receipt, slightly folded, worn at the edges, the smallest piece of evidence in the entire investigation. Yet somehow the most important. Ethan stared at it without speaking, because both men understood the same thing. Sometimes the biggest secrets do not fall apart because of complicated investigations. Sometimes they begin unraveling the moment someone notices what everyone else ignored. After that meeting, the story could have ended. The investigation was complete. The evidence had been reviewed. The decisions had been made. Yet some endings arrive quietly, long after the headlines disappear. Over the following months, Harrington Capital began recovering. New leadership stepped into key positions. Internal safeguards were strengthened. Projects that had once seemed lost returned to life. Investors regained confidence. Business magazines praised William Harrington's steady response during a difficult period. Analysts called it one of the most disciplined corporate recoveries in recent memory. But William rarely spoke about it. Whenever reporters asked what had happened, he offered the same brief answer. We learned the importance of paying attention. Most people assumed he was talking about financial oversight, risk management, corporate strategy. Only William knew he meant something else entirely. One autumn evening, nearly 6 months after the investigation ended, William returned to the restaurant. The city glowed beneath clear skies. The rush of summer tourists had faded, leaving Manhattan wrapped in the calmer rhythm of early fall. Inside the dining room, little had changed. The same warm lights, the same polished tables, the same quiet elegance. Maya was carrying a tray of coffee cups when she noticed him. William sat alone near the window where he had once studied that worn receipt. This time there were no executives beside him. No meetings. No business presentations. Just a man enjoying a quiet dinner. Maya approached his table. "Good evening, Mr. Harrington." William smiled. A genuine smile. The kind she had rarely seen before. "Good evening, Maya." She poured his coffee and prepared to leave. Then William placed a small envelope on the table. Maya looked at it curiously. "What is this?" she asked. William leaned back slightly. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. No contracts. No checks. No legal documents. Just a single page. Her eyes moved slowly across the words. William had written about integrity, about courage, about the difference between noticing something and acting on it. At the bottom was a simple sentence. "Thank you for refusing to ignore what everyone else missed." Maya looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background. William glanced toward the city lights beyond the glass. "People think success comes from intelligence," he said quietly. "Sometimes it does, but I think character matters more." Maya folded the note carefully. William continued. "The people who betrayed me were talented, extremely talented. That was never the problem." He paused. "The problem was that I trusted credentials more than character." The words lingered between them. Soft, honest, true. As Maya walked away, she realized something remarkable. The receipt had exposed a betrayal. The investigation had revealed the truth. But neither was the real lesson. The real lesson was simpler. Every day, people are given small opportunities to do the right thing. Most pass by unnoticed. Most seem insignificant. Yet sometimes a person's entire character is revealed in those quiet moments. A piece of paper on the floor. A decision to speak when silence feels easier. A choice to act without expecting anything in return. And in the end, those small moments often matter more than anyone could imagine. Winter arrived quietly in Manhattan. Cold air drifted between skyscrapers. Holiday lights appeared in storefront windows. Life moved forward as it always did. Yet some lessons remained long after the moment had passed. Months later, Maya still worked at the same restaurant. She greeted guests, carried trays, refilled coffee cups. Most customers never knew her story. They saw only a waitress moving through the dining room with calm professionalism. And that was perfectly fine with her. She had never wanted recognition. She had never expected rewards. The note William gave her remained folded inside a small drawer at home. Whenever life felt difficult, she read it again. Not because it came from a billionaire, but because it reminded her that doing the right thing mattered, even when nobody was watching. One snowy evening, the restaurant manager approached Maya before her shift. "You have a reservation request," he said. Maya looked surprised. "A request?" The manager nodded. "A private client specifically asked for your section." Hours later, the guest arrived. It was William, but this time he was not alone. Several young professionals joined him. New executives, new leaders, people helping shape the future of Harrington Capital. Throughout the evening, Maya noticed something unusual. William treated every employee with the same respect he gave the executives at his table. He thanked servers by name. He listened when people spoke. He paid attention. Near the end of the dinner, one of the younger executives asked him a question. "What was the most important business lesson you learned this year?" The table grew quiet. William looked out the window for a moment. Snowflakes drifted through the glow of city lights. Then he smiled. "Pay attention to people who do the right thing when there is nothing to gain." The executive seemed surprised by the answer. William continued. "Degrees matter. Experience matters. Talent matters. But character matters more." Across the room, Maya pretended not to hear. Yet the words reached her anyway. They lingered in the air like the soft notes of a familiar song. Later, as the guests prepared to leave, William paused beside her station. Neither mentioned investigations, betrayal, or the events that had changed both of their lives. Those chapters were over. Instead, William simply nodded and said, "Take care, Maya." She smiled. "You too, Mr. Harrington." He walked toward the exit and disappeared into the snowy Manhattan night. Maya returned to her work. The restaurant buzzed with conversation. Glasses clinked softly. The city moved on. And somewhere beyond the windows, life continued. Because in the end, the most powerful people are not always the richest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who refuse to ignore the truth when it quietly falls at their feet.